here we are, episode 3 of Beyond the Pulpit.
Yeah.
And it's you and me. What's the grammar? How do you say that?
You and I.
Mm-hmm. You and I again. And
Yes.
we're going to talk a little bit about marriage and what it's like to live in our home and be married and love Jesus. And
the inside scoop here.
The inside scoop and pastor people. But it's always fun when the two of us get to be and sit and talk. And we've had some great conversations already with Tim and others that are coming down the pike. But we're going to talk about marriage today.
Yeah. So we're excited to talk about a topic that's, of course, important to us and close to our hearts.
Especially with marriage conference at Life Church coming up in just a little bit. And don't know when this is airing, so it could have just happened, or it may just be
right after it just happened.
Oh, so I messed this up. But that's okay. They'll be okay
You're
with
human.
it.
You make mistakes.
Yeah, let the people on the other side of the screen figure it out.
Yeah,
so
it's all good.
The experts.
It's all good. But we're talking about rhythms in marriage. That's what we're talking about here. So how to make your marriage thrive, what kind of rhythms do you have in your marriage, and with God being at the center of it. Because that's the most important part is, right, is if we want to have a marriage that thrives, that Jesus is at the center of it. So first question for you is, for us or for you, how have things like prayer, studying the word, worship, doing those things together, how has that helped shape our marriage? Yeah, no,
I think it's a great question. Excuse me. You know, I think we have to go back to part of our story, which I think, or my story, which I think is important, which I think I've shared before. I'm not sure if I shared it on the podcast, but you know it. 17 years old, a junior youth leader at youth camp, said yes to Jesus at a youth camp at 14 years old. So I have a real affinity. I have a passion for what God can do at youth camps.
Yeah.
And 17 years old and standing in the back after a powerful move of God. A lot of my friends, including my brother in that moment, in that service, called to ministry, sitting in the back, do like what I've always liked to do, being behind the scenes. God has a humor in how we're leading and pastoring. And I remember feeling a little disgruntled, that's not the right word, feeling frustrated. Like God, discouraged, that's the right word. Thinking, okay, God, you've done something for all these other people, but you haven't done anything for me. And you haven't spoken to me. And so I'm cleaning up after the event or the night, the service. And at that time, it was our pastor's wife of the church that we were a part of. And she comes up to me and she says, "You thought God forgot you." And that's when she prophetically spoke the call of ministry over my life and said, you know, there's a call for you. You know, you're going to be a minister, you're going to be a pastor. But what was really important in that moment was that she said, you're not going to do it alone, that he's going to give you a partner in life that will have a passion and a dedication and a calling that you will do it together. Which was really, really, really important. So that was part of my prayer for several years until we met and so forth and so on. And so I think that is not only relevant to our story or to my story, but I believe it's relevant to anybody on the other side of the screen who is married or feels who wants to be married, right? Because we know this, and we talk about this at marriage conference, we'll talk about this in our relationship series in June as a church, is there's the gift of marriage, but there's also the gift of singleness.
Right.
And so, and God blesses both of those seasons and both of those moments in people's lives. But specifically around marriage, I think is that called to do something together. I believe that that's God's desire for any couple who's married and who puts Jesus in the center, is to be able to do life together, to live together. The scripture says that what God puts together, no man can separate.
Yeah.
You know, if I tried to rip this shirt that I have on now, right, because the threads are so enmeshed together, it would be incredibly, as long as I didn't do it at a seam, right, it would be really difficult to rip that shirt because it's a mesh. It's put together. Yeah. And what we want to avoid in marriage, I'm getting somewhere with this, is what we want to avoid in our marriages is a seam, is a weak spot, right? Where it could be ripped apart. And so the way we become closer and we embrace and feed that closeness is through our spiritual rhythms as couples. And so I think one of the things that's important is, when possible, as a couple, to be able to invest in rhythms together. And it's been impactful, back to your question, for us. So one of the things that we used to do years ago was we would pray separately. We would read separately. We would, spend quiet time separately. And one of the things that we've done, and I think pretty well and pretty consistent, I would say at least 5 days a week, is we get up together, get our coffee, Jesus juice, right? Only real Christians drink caffeinated coffee.
So I can form a sentence.
Yeah, exactly. And real Christian, this is really important for everybody. And, I'm okay with it that this is a public podcast, right? Real Christians drink caffeinated coffee and real Christians don't go to Walmart. And
gosh, you can't say those things.
Why?
Because
I can say those things.
No, you cannot say those
because,
things.
I'm hoping for, some royalties from Target. Go to Target, right?
Listen,
or another store. Okay, anyway.
Back on track.
So ADD. And is how important, what was I talking about?
Spiritual rhythms. Praying together.
And so we get up and we pray together and we do it together. Right. And even when we're reading, I'm not saying that we read to each other, but being in the same room, being in the same space. And so taking my own personal rhythms, that is part of my story, right? Where I had to be much more intentional after 2018, realizing that I was spiritually depleted. I was emotionally depleted. I was mentally depleted, that I needed to incorporate better rhythms into my daily life. But then doing them together, I think, has been a game changer.
Yeah.
Right? It's even harder and it's even more of a game changer when we're mad at each other.
Yes.
It's really, really hard.
Yes.
To pray for each other when we're mad at each other.
True.
Like this morning, you were mad at me for a dream you had that wasn't. It's your dream or
I'm
nightmare.
Still getting over it. Actually,
yeah, isn't that crazy? Like you're mad at me. You're angry with me. You're huffing and puffing. I had to pray and I was asleep the whole time.
And it was my turn to pray this morning, and I did, and I prayed for you like I always do.
Absolutely, and you should have. You're a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Did you have a follow up? You don't want to ask me more questions? That was good.
No, we're going to pivot somewhere else.
All right.
I mean, you kind of already talked about this, but so we have 3 daughters.
Yep.
And how have you involved them in spiritual rhythms in our home? Like speak to family devotions or whatnot. What does it look like to have a family that's in a consistent spiritual rhythm?
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about with this podcast is that this is a place where we can have conversations that we normally wouldn't have on a Sunday. And I think one of the things that is really important for us is to lead authentically and transparently. And a lot of times, and I remember being like this when I would look up to my senior pastor when I was a young teenager or a young adult, and you look and you kind of have these unrealistic expectations for their life, and you look at them because you admire them and you respect them and you see God working in and through them. But one of the things you learn when you're in our role, pastoring a large church, leading a large church, or just in general, it doesn't have to be a large church, just leading, is that people may have unrealistic expectations for us. And one of the things we're trying to do is consistently and continually, while leading and having authority and I believe spiritual authority and influence, but within that, show people that we're not perfect and that we struggle with the same things that everybody else struggles with. And whether we've gone through it and we've seen God work in us and grow us, or we're going through it. And so one of the things we debate all the time. I mean, we said this, not debate, we talk about all the time. We said this the other day. I think I started the conversation in the kitchen with cleaning up after dinner, and you and I were the only ones cleaning up. And the girls were doing something else that was not helpful. And I looked at you and I said, why are we the ones cleaning up the table? And I said, we are failing as parents. I'm going somewhere with this, which is we have a lot of work to do in our own home on how we could create better spiritual rhythms as a family, right? A lot of times, completely honest, we'll look at each other and go, there are people in our church that are doing it a lot better than we are. And that's okay. It's okay. Their life is different. Our lives are different. But I think what we've consistently done, and you correct me if I'm wrong, consistently done
I'm good at
is, yeah, you're very good at correcting me, especially when we're driving. I don't know
Okay,
if people
stay
are listening
focused.
on the other side and they're married, and I don't know, as you get older, like I feel like you
I
need to
speak up more.
in the car when
Yeah.
I'm driving. It's like,
Okay.
it's okay. I saw the car. I saw the red light. I'm a little tender right now from our trip here to the studio. But anyway, what was I talking about again? You did
talking
it to me
about
again.
In our home, you're talking about we don't always
What
get
we've
it
done
right.
really, really, I think is we don't do well. Let me tell you what we don't do well at is like every morning we do devotionals with our kids and, all those kind of things. However, here's what we have done well. Two major categories. One is I believe vision is caught more than it's taught. And what I mean by that is they have watched us consistently over the years be faithful to the local church, love people well. We're not perfect, but love people well. And, we've shown them, every morning, I guarantee you 20 years from now, they will look back and go, I remember at 5:45 in the morning or 6 o'clock when they would get up, seeing my mom and my dad praying together, reading under candlelight and spending time with God and with each other. Right. So that's something that they're watching.
Sure. It's our lifestyle.
It's our lifestyle. They're learning. The other thing is the importance of church. Right. I know that there's debate around this, but I personally don't agree with what I'm about to, what I think people say is like, I'm not going to force my kids to go to church. I don't believe in that. I think you need to force your kids to go to church because you force them to go to school.
Yeah.
You force them to clean their rooms. You force them to eat healthy foods. You force them to do all these things that are valuable and important for other parts of their life. But when it comes to church, we go, I don't want them to hate church, right? Or I don't want them to be forced to do something. It won't be their faith. Well, guess what? I hated going to school growing up. My parents forced me to go to school. But now I love, as I grew up and went to college and so forth and so on, I love to learn now.
Sure.
I love to hear things and read things. But someone could argue I would have never done that because my parents forced me to go to school. I think it's the same thing from a church perspective. And so those are two or three things. I think it was three things I said that I believe we did pretty well.
I mean, I think for me, sometimes I have this unrealistic expectations, right? And then if I put these unrealistic expectations on us and our family, then I get disappointed. And then it's like, I feel like failure, whatever. So it's not healthy. All that to say, it's not a healthy thing. But because it's like, I get a book and a devotional, I'm like, we're all going to do this together and, all these things. And then it's like every week the schedule is different. And so it's hard to find that consistent time to do it with the girls. However, all that to say, if I look at where our lifestyle and I look at our kids and I look at their faith and how it's being developed, they know church is a non-negotiable. And they like going to church. They know that
Most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's moments, but overall,
they don't like being in 17 services on a Sunday. But yeah,
serving, that's just what we do, right? We serve people, so they don't complain about serving. Worship music's on in our house all the time.
They go to sleep with it.
Exactly. So those kind of things, it's like they know what helps them. They know that if they're struggling, that prayer is going to help them. That I'll pray with them.
That was the other thing. You do that really well.
Yeah.
Praying with them every night.
Yeah, I mean that's part of just
the rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. But so they now it's their faith, right? Or if they're struggling, they'll read their Bible at night when they can't sleep, whatever. So those things. So it's not a set thing that we do that has to be done scheduled. It's a lifestyle. Yeah. So I think if we take a step back and evaluate that, I feel like we haven't made it, but we're doing okay.
Yeah. People want a little insight into our marriage too. Is I there's a bird. I'm all over the place. Your other card is upside down. Can you flip that over? It's driving me nuts. But yeah, so that feels so much better now. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But for those that are couples that are watching or listening, and I want to preface with this. We completely understand that there are some where spouses don't come with them to church. They're not engaged. And what we never want anybody to feel is shame or hurt or disappointment. We've received that feedback in the past during our relationship series where people will be in the crowd, in the congregation, and we're talking about these important things for marriage, and meanwhile they're feeling sad because they're divorced or they're not married, or and it's a desire of their heart, or their spouse won't come with them, and so that's never the intention. But at the same time, we can't neglect sharing important principles and kingdom principles for folks. But so understanding that there are some, and maybe I'll ask the question twofold.
Okay.
Understanding that there are some that their spouse doesn't want to engage in a relationship with Christ, with Jesus. Okay. That's part one. I'm about to ask the first part of the question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to those spouses to begin some sort of spiritual rhythm or some sort of rhythm? And then those that maybe both are watching or listening and going, we need to do this, both of them.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to those folks?
Sure. So for the spouse that doesn't attend church, I would say your greatest testimony is how you live your life, and it's also a transformed life, a transformed heart. So
it's really good.
So instead of feeling disappointed, those are natural. You're going to feel disappointed. You're going to want your spouse to come with you. However, instead of letting that disappointment create tension in your marriage or create bitterness or create whatever, a negative emotion, take it to God, first of all, and pray about it, right? Talk to God, pray for a change of heart. Occasionally say, hey, how can I pray for you this week to your spouse, right? Those kind of things. But a transformed heart, when normally you would be screaming and yelling at in a conflict, now you're taking a step back. It's a changed life. It's a changed behavior. It's a way that you love your spouse better. So how can you love your spouse better so that they are like, hey, wait, she's not the same person that she was before she started going to that church. And then there's curiosity.
Maybe like not nag the spouse while they're driving would be a great example. I'm just thinking of practical examples.
Yeah.
People need practical examples.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe you just need to refine your driving skills. Is that what we're talking about here? Anyways, back to that particular person. So I would say it's the way that God is transforming your heart, the way that, Jesus is loving you, just love your spouse that way. And then again, pray for them, because the power of prayer. God loves that person. He loves your spouse.
Yeah.
And so he wants to be in relationship with your spouse as well. So again, just continue to, as much as you can, not show the disappointment, the sadness, all that stuff, the nagging. The nagging is going to create the reverse effect that you want. It's not going to draw them closer to church and closer to you. It's going to actually push them away. So, maybe it's an occasional, hey, I'm going to this thing with this group of people maybe it's not a church service, but it's some other gathering. Invite them, include them. That would be my...
For part one. Before you get to part two, that was all really good, because I think one of the things that we'll tell people all the time, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, someone came up to me and they're like, I really want my husband to start coming to church, and what should I do? And, I keep inviting them, I keep inviting him, and blah, 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 every week, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, keep doing that, but don't nag him. Don't make him feel guilty. Don't make him feel shame. Just love him well.
Yeah.
Care for him. Make it, if you're a cook and you like to cook a meal for him. Do something that he values, right? And
that's not to manipulate to get what you want. That's just to love.
Good.
That's just to like,
that's
you're
really
not
good.
manipulating so that you get what you want. It's like, no, because I know now God loves me. He loves me for me. And I'm going to, out of that posture, I'm going to serve my husband. I'm going to serve my spouse. Yeah.
Before you go into part two again of that question, like for those that may not know, we're married 18 years in June. June 14th is our anniversary. Known each other over 20 years. It's a long time. Sadly, average marriages are lasting, less than 7 years. And so, but those 18 years have not been easy.
No.
Right? There's been...
Year one, we almost got
divorced. And most people don't know that, other than us sharing it from the pulpit. And But it was really, it's really, really hard. And not because it was just between us, because actually I would say, we get along pretty well. We have our moments, but we get along pretty well. It's all the challenges of life.
Sure, the pressures.
The pressures of life, the kids' family pressures. I'm not sure if we have an episode this season at all, but I'm sure we'll talk about it in marriage conference, which is just about how you navigate all those pressures.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that was clear. Is number one, we're speaking out of experience, both good and bad.
Sure.
And so what about the couple that's watching and going, okay, we're both serving Jesus. We need to do better.
Yeah. I think go to church together. Basic, simple. After church, it's like, hey, what'd you get from the message? It's nothing that's got to be this grand, like we're going to do all these scripted things. It's just talking about like, hey, what did you think about the sermon today? What did God share with you, or what stood out to you? Right. That's very simple. That's something you can do. Because I hear a lot of times couples are like afraid to pray with each other out loud. Like they're intimidated by that. And so I think obviously praying together is super important. It's super intimate. But it's just talking to God. It's not like you have to have a script, or it has to sound so eloquent or whatever. But if that's not your comfort level yet, just talk about the message, go to church together, talk about the message. And then I would say, how can I pray for you? Right? Individually ask the person. If you don't want to pray out loud together, just start with that.
That's good. That's really good. I was thinking as you were talking, we're in this cohort with about 12, I think it is, 12 other lead pastors from around the country.
Yeah.
And two great pastors are leading the cohort, one from Texas, one from Louisiana. And the one from Texas on our cohort meeting this past Monday was talking about a gentleman in his church that was a high-level executive.
Yeah.
Probably it sounded like a multi-billion-dollar organization that he led. So big thing. And he was leading a small group with this gentleman that's in it. And Pastor Jeff, was talking about marriage and all of what we're talking about now. Right. And he encouraged this man came to him, the CEO, and said, my marriage is struggling. We're not connecting. Right. We're not emotionally connecting. And of course that's translating into not physically connecting. Sure. Right. And Pastor Jeff says to him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just every night before bed, when you're laying in bed, I just want you to grab hands and say, how can I pray for you? Mm-hmm. How can I pray for you? Not with the intent for physical connection, even though that may come from that, because when you care, that's a byproduct. And the first time he did it, he was like, and she gave him stuff. He was so nervous. He didn't know what to do. Yeah. This is a CEO that's speaking in front of thousands of people and leading this powerful organization. Right. And he could not pray for his wife or with space. His wife. And what I think I heard you say is that may be uncomfortable in the beginning. So try different opportunities, but build ultimately.
Yeah, to that.
To that. I think that's really, really important. Going back to the church thing, I was meeting with someone within our church for for breakfast the other day, and they're a coach of a Division I sport and in the Lehigh Valley area, and we were talking about church and the importance of church and the consistency with church. And I looked at him because he's a coach, and I said, if your players would only show up to practice 50% of the time, would you let them be in the game? Mm-hmm. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, why? And he went through, well, they wouldn't have the skills, and they wouldn't this, and they wouldn't be in shape, and all these kind of things. And I said, why is it okay why are we okay with people not showing up to church consistently and only showing up maybe 50% of the time? And then if we're those people, we expect to be able to navigate the things of life at full strength. It's impossible. Yeah. Right? Church is a culmination, a celebration of all that God did, a culmination of all God did that week, but it's also an opportunity to be equipped. It's an opportunity to be encouraged. It's an opportunity to be inspired in order to be filled up, in order to go out and be the church. And so as a couple, showing up to church together, bringing your kids to church together, worshiping together in church, listening to the word together, the sermon, the preaching, the teaching
Right.
together, being involved in the church together, there is just something powerful. And we've seen it. We've done this long enough. Many, many years we've been, whether myself in full-time ministry, a lot longer you, but we've been in ministry for a long time, is when those things happen and the marriage is strong, and then for some reason they allow the enemy to get between them and they get offended and they leave a church and they do it all the wrong ways, all of a sudden their marriage falls apart because there is just something sacred about about that. But yeah, I thought that was really, really good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So talking about community, right? And the church is community for us.
Yeah.
How has the community around us been in strengthening our own marriage? Like, how do you lean on others, whether in the church or outside of church, for support in our relationship?
Yeah, I think, and of course for us, it's a little unique, right? Because we're pastors. And so I want to answer it in a way that's relevant to all the pastors that may be listening and watching, and then relevant to everybody else. I think that I sort of leaned into that just a few moments ago about the importance of church. Is community is so incredibly important. And I think we only recently, over the last couple of years, have recognized the importance to have someone speak into our marriage, have somebody speak in. And so we've got a great older couple, Dwayne and Raina, who we've shared some intimate parts of our marriage with, and they're retired pastors, so they understand that role. But to have someone, and here's what's interesting: we were meeting with someone last night, right? You and I, about something somewhat related, not marriage related, and it's like when you're in community, not everybody. If you're in a small group and there's 12 people, not everybody in that small group is going to be your friend, right? As you get older, there's less and less people that become your friends. When you're a kid, teenager, you've got like 30 friends, 50 friends, right? But as you get older, you get more particular who those people are. And so I think the importance of community when you're in a small group is not to go, I want all 12 of these people to be my buddy, right? The part of it is you're learning from the conversation that's going on. And then the hope is that you'll develop a close relationship with somebody in that group, whether another couple or whatever. And it's so important to have that because it is, and they're objective and they're a follower of Jesus, because it is so important for us to have people that can speak into our life.
Sure.
Not just, I'm not talking about correcting or criticism, but speak into our lives because they love us. Right. And it's the same answer, whether you're pastors as well. It just looks a little different for pastors than it would for those that are not pastors. So I think for us, we've grown in that area and are still growing in that area. Where we did it wrong for about 15 years was that we didn't invest in that. And for me, if I'm being honest and transparent, which that's my hope.
We hope that you are. We hope that you are.
Yeah. Is that some of it was my own pride. I don't want people to see and judge us and think that we're not perfect or whatever, or that we're failing. And so not just that, we don't have just that couple. We also have a counselor that we meet with about ministry related stuff. But many times the ministry related stuff impacts our marriage a lot of the times,
the pressure,
right? The hurts, the rejections, the pain, all that kind of stuff. And so I think what I'm trying to say is, or
what I'm hearing you say is that it's important to have people.
Yeah,
it's important not necessarily to have a large amount of people, but a couple that's maybe a little further ahead than you.
Yeah, that
can speak into your marriage, that's maybe walked the walk, has been there before you guys, that you trust, right? That's going to be somebody you trust, that it's not going to share your business. It's not going to use it as let's have a prayer moment for so-and-so, right? And you can trust. That's going to help speak into your marriage, and that you can deal with challenges or whatever season you're walking through.
Yeah, that was really good. Hopefully people caught what just happened. You just saved me because I was going down one of those ADD trails of mine, and it was really good in my head, but then I wasn't getting to the point. And so you were like, what I hear you saying is pretty much what you're saying is it's time for you to stop talking and let's wrap that part up. But no, that was really good. That was exactly what I was saying. I don't need to add to it. Question for you is, which I think is really relevant for everybody is, we talked about the prayer. We talked about, reading the Bible together or being in the rooms and worship and all those kind of things. What do you think from your opinion, experience in our marriage, which one of those kind of spiritual rhythms do you think were most impactful to our marriage? Or what can we do better at?
Yeah. I definitely
just remember, everybody's watching this. Don't shock me. Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to shock you.
Okay. Don't make me cry.
I think the praying together definitely has elevated. So the time we spent, our individual walk with God is absolutely number one. It's super important. But there has to be a time where you're with your spouse and doing that, worshiping God together. So for us, we're just not like put on the worship music and, that's just not what we do. It's always on, but it's not like we're standing there and we're worshiping together, right? So it's the prayer time where we're spending time in prayer. And I do think the growth moments, at least for me, is because when I am upset with you, I shut down and I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. And so it forces me to forgive quicker. It's forced me to, and just
admit that I was probably right.
Act like Jesus a little bit more in my marriage. So I think
you just ignored that statement.
Yeah, no. I think the praying together has definitely been the thing that's grown us the most. Well, I can't even talk now. I've grown the most in our marriage in doing that together. So, I mean, going to church, obviously we work at church. So it's when we're at someone else's church or when we're at a conference or something like that where we're getting poured into, and then we can talk about the message. I think that's another thing that's been super impactful. Or when I'm studying in the Word and I'm like, hey, I never saw this before. And then I bring it to you and you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. What a revelation. So having those moments too, where we can just kind of talk about the Word and see what God's sharing with you and what's He's sharing with me.
Yeah, I know we have to wrap up, but I would agree 100%. I think that's been really impactful for us. And I think it's impactful for our kids. And I think our church gets to experience that, right? They experience the result of that. Healthy leaders will have a healthy church.
Sure.
Unhealthy leaders will have an unhealthy church.
Right.
And so
our soul is the most important thing that we need to make sure is healthy.
Correct. And our bodies, but our soul is most important. And so it is so, if I could give any advice to anybody who's listening that is a leader of a church, pastor, a lead pastor, or just a high-level leader in the church, is make sure that you're healthy. Because what's going to happen though is if you're not healthy, your church won't be healthy, and then it comes back and haunts you, right? Because then an unhealthy church produces unhealthy results, and now you're managing on all these results, and it all started because you're not healthy. Right. I'm not saying we're perfect, but it's important for us to have rhythms as a couple, rhythms individually, to have people, I'm circling all back, people who speak into our marriage, into our lives, right? So that we can be healthier.
Right. And those closest to you will tell you when you're not healthy.
Correct.
And so you have to be willing, the pride thing, you have to be willing to swallow your pride and say, yep, you're probably right. And I probably need to do something about that. So yeah.
So, I know, like I said, we have to wrap up, but one of the things that I really appreciate about our marriage and our, about you is you do forgive quick. At least I think you're forgiving quick. You're acting like you're forgiving quick. No. You're forgiving quick. But I think that we have, over the last 18 years of being married, there have been things that we've been uncomfortable with, meaning, whether it was praying together or doing, whatever. And we've forced ourselves to do those things for the sake of our marriage and for the sake of our kids. Yeah. And I'm proud of us for doing that. I'm hopeful that what we're doing is setting, not only making our marriage healthier, but making it healthier for our kids, right? Because as parents of daughters, so a dad of daughters, they're learning from me what a good, how a good, healthy husband,
Right.
Jesus following husband should be, and what a Jesus following dad should be.
Yeah.
And from you, they're learning what does a Jesus following mother look like,
Sure.
and a Jesus following wife look like. One of the things we pray almost every day is that our kids' faith would not ride on our coattails.
Sure. It'd be their
Right?
own faith. Yeah.
It would be their own faith, and that they would marry men that are that love God, love them, and love us. And that prayer is so critical. Like, a lot of people pray for their kids' spouses in the future, if that's what God's calling them, to be married. But they many times forget the third one, which is that the spouse would love the parents, right? Love us. And
Sure.
so that's been really good. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful that these conversations help people, right? A lot of, we didn't do Beyond the Pulpit because everybody's doing podcasts. We're doing Beyond the Pulpit because we're called together in this season, the next 20 years or so. We're called to use the platform, the influence, our gifts, our talents, our brokenness, our story to help other people.
Yeah.
And I know that both of our hearts are that these sort of conversations help someone else.
Right.
And that God would work through it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when we were talking earlier about the call on your life and then to have a spouse or partner to do that with, I remember when we were in Guatemala, my first mission trip, and in Guatemala, the pastor in Guatemala prayed that prayer over us too. And so it was like confirmation. I don't know if you remember that. But
No, I don't remember it.
yeah. So
Quickly
we were in Guatemala, but we were at a prayer or at their service in the evening. And there was one of the pastors came over and I guess asked if we were together or dating or whatever. And then
we were engaged at that time, right? Or were we married?
We weren't.
We were dating? Okay.
And then just prayed that we would be kind of in ministry together, which was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
We're doing that.
That's interesting. I didn't remember that.
Totally not in my radar.
Oh, this is embarrassing on screen. I don't remember that. But that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. And so, well, I think this was a good talk.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll bless people. So grateful for all of you that took the time to watch and to listen. And I would tell all you wives out there, don't nag your husband with their driving. They know what they're doing. Love you guys.